Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, coming to you virtually from Seattle, the great Pacific Northwest, and today, down I-5 into the Bay Area, as we welcome in Linda Popke as our co-host. Listen, if you want to learn how to grow or run a successful business, this right here is the podcast for you. I like to call it the podcast of record. This is where street smarts and book smarts collide. I'm Dan Whedon, and as I said, my co-host Linda Popke is in the Bay Area. We are thankful to have her, and even more thankful to have our guest today, Janice Mashala from Paladin Partners. Janice is an experienced executive coach, CEO, corporate director, and community leader. She is one of the top go-to resources for entrepreneurs and executives seeking opportunities for growth and change. She has a diverse industry experience in technology, higher education, publishing, and B2B software and services. You put that together with her international coaching certifications, MBA, and BA in psychology. Janice brings powerful and relevant insights. We can't wait to talk about psychology and a whole bunch of other things related to entrepreneurs. Janice, welcome. We will be with you in just a little bit. Everybody, please remember, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube. Linda, what are we?
We are ubiquitous.
We are ubiquitous. We come to you from a whole bunch of different cities. Atlanta, we call the mothership, but we have a whole bunch of other places. Boca Raton, Charleston, Boston. We've got some new ones popping up all over the place. In fact, I hear, Linda, New York City is coming around the corner. But today we are front and center with our guest, Janice Mashala. Before we get to Janice, I want to welcome in my co-host, Linda. Linda, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you?
Good. You can tell that I am not at my normal desk. I am sitting in the offices of Port Ludlow Associates, which own and run and operate Port Ludlow Associates, which is one of our Port Ludlow Resort, which is one of our fine sponsors. Many thanks to Diana Smellin, the CEO, who has twice been a guest on our show and continues to be a sponsor for us. So I'm doing a live version here, doing the best I can with trying to run this from my iPad, but let's see if we can make that all work. So listen, Janice, or Linda, you brought Janice in, and we're going to talk a lot about psychology, but I'm going to start right now by saying, I've experienced mental frailty at times in my life. Specifically, I recently wrote about being on the golf course and having some mental frailties, which I think many of us golfers do. What's your thoughts, your comments about, people who are in powerful leadership positions? We all kind of have some of those issues dealing with mental frailties, don't we?
We do. And I think the problem is nobody wants to admit it. I think it's powerful to say, hey, I'm not having a good day today. My head's not in the right place. And I think we're seeing more of this as we're now in year 3 of the pandemic, but we've all been kind of turned upside down. There's a war on in Ukraine. All kinds of things are happening. Are we going to have what we need at the store because of supply chain issues? So I think what we need to do is we need to probably spend a little time and admit that we are not all perfect, and that we might have something that kind of gets in our way every so often.
Well, and I think, the mental frailty that I think of myself, and again, I'm thinking, not only golf, but other things, is kind of those crises in confidence where the issue is just about us. And so I'm going to bring on Janice now. Janice, first of all, welcome to the show. We're so thankful to have you here.
I'm excited to be here, Dan. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I don't need you. You don't have to necessarily give me psychotherapy or any counseling today, especially on my golf game, which needs a lot more than that. But I gotta believe I've worked with countless business owners over the years, and I think we all at any level. I don't care if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 business or running your own single shingle shop. We all have to have a pretty good mental fitness, don't we?
We do. And yet, even people who are in the most senior roles have what we call imposter syndrome. Am I really equipped to be this? Am I really good enough for this role? Why did I get here? Imposter syndrome is a very real thing. And that's one of the things that happens. I call them the voices in our head, our saboteurs. We all have the judge, by the way, and the judge can show up as I judge myself, I judge others, or I judge circumstances. Women, by the way, tend to judge themselves a lot. We're very hard on ourselves. The judge has accomplice saboteurs, by the way, and accomplice saboteurs are things like a hyperachiever, a controller, a hyper rational, a like I'm trying to think of what the other hyper is. Well, there's a pleaser, there's a hyper rational, there's a bunch of hypers. I'm drawing a blank on the hypers right now, but this is a model that I came to called positive intelligence. And it was developed by an entrepreneur, Shirzad Chamine. And interesting story, he was actually a founder of a company. And when he got stressed, he became a rageaholic. And his team obviously took the brunt of that. Well, his father was a rageaholic, was verbally abusive. And when you get stressed, you go back to where you learned certain patterns and behaviors. So his team rebelled, and it was either them or him. And his VCs fired him. And he realized he had to do something about this pattern of behavior. And he dove into the literature, and he has a degree in neuroscience. He's a mechanical engineer. He's an MBA. He has all the credentials that basically became an inspiration for this positive intelligence work. And it allows you to identify who your saboteurs are. And what those saboteurs do is keep us in the limbic system of our brain, which is where we live in the negative place. And that's where fight or flight actually happens. And if we're there, that's where stress, anxiety, fear, depression live. And that is not our best place. So people burn cortisol there. And in order to create dopamine and serotonin, you want to be in the executive function of your brain. And there's a place and a way to shift. That's mental fitness, learning how to do that.
Fascinating. And I love it, because I think a lot of people become entrepreneurs because they want to get rid of that terrible boss that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they get a worse terrible boss, which is this executive or in their head, the judge in their head. So how do we get to this positive intelligence? Obviously, we can't do it in a podcast, but what are the things that entrepreneurs need to be thinking about to get to that more positive place?
Well, first of all, you have to learn who lives in that head. And there's an assessment, and it's pretty easy to go find it. It's actually at positiveintelligence.com/science. And you can do a saboteur assessment, and you can do a PQ assessment. So you can figure out where you are in the negative or the positive, and you can figure out who those voices are. Once you learn who those voices are, it's very powerful, because you can start teasing it apart. And we all work on our physical fitness, right? What do we do to work on our mental fitness and create the muscle to learn how to shift out of the negative to the positive? You know, Brene Brown has done a lot of work on trauma. The pandemic has created trauma for all of us. So the one through line that she has done in her research, or has found in her research of trauma survivors, there's one practice they've all had, a practice of gratitude. That is one of the most powerful techniques for mental fitness, is knowing every day that you're grateful for something or some things, but it has to be something new. So it can't be, I'm grateful for my family. It has to be grateful for something somebody in your family did. And boy, is that a powerful technique. So that alone can create serotonin and dopamine and create a much more positive person. But depression is very high in entrepreneurs. So giving yourself a break and knowing that you're struggling, and it's okay to struggle, and that we're all human, and that we know that we may be having challenges, and normalizing that and humanizing that, because as an entrepreneur, we have to role model what's going on with us, or our employees aren't going to understand that it may be going on for them and it's okay. That's a big part of being an entrepreneur, is helping employees understand that we're all human and it's okay to have feelings and it's not always going to be a good day. And hey, call in and have a mental health day. Maybe you need to recharge. There's a lot of burnout out there.
Okay, so Janice, now you know what, you've actually scared me a little bit, because I thought before this show that I had those two little people on my shoulders. I had the angel and the devil. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You had the positive encourager and you had the person leading you down the wrong path. Now I found out I have a whole bunch of saboteurs in my head.
That's right.
So
Crowded in there.
yeah, I got a whole team
You
in
do.
there. Let me ask you this, because my experience has been that entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners tend to a lot of times be kind of visionaries, high level thinkers, very confident in a lot of ways, maybe especially in the beginning. And I would think a common refrain from many of them, both male and female, is something like, I'm okay, I'll figure it out. I don't need help. I'll just got to work something out myself. I'm tough. Probably that's what I'm tough. I'm resilient. I can do this. And maybe it's not as easy to see that fitness level. I mean, some of us can look at ourselves and say, boy, I need to get fit. I can see that. We can't see this as much on the mental fitness side. What are some triggers, or maybe could you respond to that?
You bet. Let me tell you about one of my clients who believed that he had to be a different person at work than he was at home. Couldn't show emotion, didn't show empathy, was all business. You know, you don't talk about yourself. It's all about work. And at home, he was a loving grandfather. He was an amazing father, but he believed you were two different people, absolutely two different people. But what people saw at work was a stoic, a high achiever, a bar that nobody could reach. He was such a high performer, and everybody believed they were failing under him because they couldn't meet his level of quality and standards. And the team was fearful of him, quite frankly, because he had such a perspective on where they wanted to go and the vision that he had, that they felt like, we're never going to get there. And the morale was terrible. And they didn't want to disappoint him. And the turnover was high and the strife was high. And I was brought in because it was sort of like, this guy has 60% of our revenue in the company and we can't afford to lose him, but we're losing all these people. And the fundamental shift was when he learned that he had to be a person, that he had to be human, that he had to have empathy, that he had to show himself. And it took probably close to 6 months to break through that and really bust that myth of, if you're a real human being and you show that you're vulnerable and that you're imperfect, just like they are, things will open up and be so different. And it has become an incredibly high performing team where everybody's in it together. And now they're not fearful. And now it's a team that it pulls together and not pulls apart. But he didn't believe he had a problem. Not that problem. The problem was everybody else wasn't measuring up for him. So yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah, wow. You know what? I can't believe we're already, Linda, I'm going to give you a chance to do the hot or not coming out of break, because I want to make sure that you get your questions in. So we're going to do a little flip here. We are going to take a short break to hear from today's Spotlight sponsor. When we come back with our guest, Janice Mishala, for our hot or not section of the show, I'm going to entrust my intrepid co-host, Linda, to give her the first hot or not. You won't want to miss that. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
I'd love to write or publish a book, but I just don't have the time. Does this sound like you? Maybe you have a compelling story to share or valuable advice for clients and prospects. If only you could get the story into a published format. Think you don't have time to write a book? Think your writing isn't polished enough to get your message across? Think this all sounds too overwhelming? Think again. At Leverage to Market Associates, we help aspiring authors transform a great book idea into an attractive published work. If you've written most of your book, we can help edit your work and drive it through the production process. If you're not sure where to start, we'll coach you through the process to organize your thoughts and create a compelling book outline. And if you're just not comfortable writing a book yourself, we can ghostwrite this for you too. Contact us at leveragetomarket.com for a complimentary evaluation of your nonfiction book concept today and bring your book to life.
Thank you, and welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Linda Popke, and our guest today is my friend and colleague Janice Mashallah. And our next segment is Hot or Not. So we're going to ask you some questions here, and you're going to tell us whether they're hot or not. What you think about some of these, Janice? Ready to get going here?
You bet.
Okay. So my first one is I'm going to ask you about what's hotter, having ambition or knowledge?
Ambition.
So explain why.
I think that you can always gain knowledge. I mean, we have a whole world of knowledge, but ambition allows you to have grit and determination and drive. And you can't find that in a book.
Great.
So Janice, my hot or not needs a little bit of a setup. So allow me just a couple of seconds. I worked for a client and I did this 360-degree deal with their leadership team to try to get some idea. And to a person, the leadership team wanted their boss, my client, to take more time off. They thought that he needed to relax more, to take more time off. And that kind of came through me. So my hot or not is this. Is it hot or not to stand up, muster the courage to talk to your boss and say, boss, you need to take some more time off?
I think that's a hot.
How do you do that though? I mean, because some people might say, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm a little bit intimidated. I'm a little nervous. I'm concerned about how they might react. What are some things that you might suggest to people who think it's the right thing to do, but might be a little bit nervous about it?
I think that's where a carefrontation comes in.
What did you say?
Carefrontation.
Carefrontation. Explain that one. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's I'm concerned about you. I care about you. We want you here for the long term. High blood pressure, health, all those things matter. And everybody needs to be recharged. And you can't be on that pace for long or something's going to suffer. And so we really would love it if you would just give yourself permission to take time. So it's the carefrontation of we worry about you and we care about you. And we really think it would help the company and yourself if you took a break.
By the way, I know Linda's next, but I love that word. I've never heard it before.
I love it too. Write that down.
I wrote it down too. That's awesome. Linda, you got the next.
So I want to go back to, we talked about ambition versus knowledge. So if I have ambition, is that enough? So true or false, can anyone with ambition be an entrepreneur? It's got to be more than that. I can get the knowledge, but what else do I need to kind of be successful?
I think you need a big idea. You need something that you're passionate about, something that is going to change the world, whatever that change might be. It might not be as big as something, because I think everybody has something they care about. So to me, passion, not just ambition, but passion. Because there's so many ups and downs in entrepreneurship. If you're not passionate about something, if you don't have a mission, it's not going to happen, because, entrepreneurship is not about mercenary. It's about missionary.
Missionary, that's interesting. So just to ask a follow-on question, Dan. So if I've got the ambition and I've got the passion, but every entrepreneur I've ever met is going to change the world with their idea. And a lot of those people don't quite make it. So there's got to be something else. Is there something else besides the ambition, besides the passion? In your experience, what separates out the ones who make it from the ones who don't?
Can they sell their idea to others? Can they
Ah.
lead a team? Can they put a group of people together and get them to follow them? They can't do it by themselves. We've all met the entrepreneur who's going to change the world, but they can't get anybody behind them. And so this is where the book that I'm writing really comes into play, because it's all about people, and the people have to be values aligned. And so if you're all following a mission and you have common values, you can get through just about anything, because then trust happens and psychological safety happens. And then the journey becomes a much more even-keeled journey. And then the norms evolve, which creates the culture. And you can get through a lot when you've got a cohesive culture.
Janice, this is such a fascinating conversation. I'm going to jump out of the hot or not, because I want to go back to mental fitness, where we actually started with the first question. And it makes me wonder, maybe some people listening to this are going to jump into entrepreneurship, maybe as a first timer. I would have to think that if somebody were at least aware, even though they hadn't experienced some of the challenges being an entrepreneur is, if they were able to start off saying, hey, I know part of this is I got to be mentally fit. And I may think I'm mentally fit, but I ain't seen nothing yet. What would be some advice to somebody in whatever industry, whatever field, somebody was starting a business, or maybe getting an opportunity to be a first-time CEO? What are some maybe daily disciplines or some disciplines and behaviors that they could do right away that would help with mental fitness in a proactive way?
Dan, that's a great question. That is an absolutely fantastic question. The first thing would be to get a plan with your family, to have an understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur with your family. I've seen too many times where the spouse thought they married somebody and that somebody wasn't an entrepreneur. They liked their cushy life. They liked the big paycheck. They liked the certainty of whatever that job was that their spouse had. And it became a push-pull, very contentious situation, because who they now had that they were married to was not who they thought they married. And that becomes a real stressor. And that's a big stressor when you're already in a stressful startup situation. And I've seen marriages fall apart as a result of that. So having that, what's the contract that we have? How are we as a family going to operate in this very thing we're going into? And then having, like, what's the regular check-in we're going to do? What is the inviolable thing I'm going to do? Like, I will be home for dinner with the kids no matter what. I might go back to work. I might log on after they go back to bed. But what's the thing we're going to do as a family? It's going to make sure the unit still is covered, right? A daily practice, I think, of gratitude is huge. Meditation, or some kind of, how do I slow my mind down? How do I get centered in some way, shape, or form, is super helpful. Exercise, regular exercise routine, so that you are doing something physical and mental. So whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga can be restorative, and you get your mind gets quieter also with yoga, something that quiets your mind. Because when you're an entrepreneur, your mind's racing. Sleep is one of the most important things that we can do for our body, mentally and physically. And there's a whole lot of studies around sleep, and we as entrepreneurs tend to not to get much sleep. And that is actually probably one of the most important things for us. And people aren't,
yeah, I'm
people
sorry, Lynn, I
aren't
wanted to
gonna
ask.
love hearing about that.
Yeah, I want to ask a follow-up question, Linda, if that's okay, because I think you're so spot on, Janice, with both sleep and physical activity. Yet I still hear people who logically understand that and I'll hear them say something like, yeah, I just got to get more time to do that. I don't have the time. I know I need to, but I've got other things are more pressing. And my thought is that both of these are not time resource issues. They're about priorities. And
Absolutely.
it's a misunderstanding that they can actually be more productive and more efficient if they got the other two right. Could you comment on that?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things I work on with my clients, is prioritization and what's more important, your health, your life, or your business. Because if you don't have your health and your life, then you're not going to have your business. And I'll say, just try it for a while and see what happens. And what happens is clarity of mind, less stress, clearer headed thinking is huge in coming up with inspiration and ideas, and learning to delegate, learning to say no. Part of what an entrepreneur doesn't do well is taking stuff off of their plate and looking at the urgent versus important, and what is the thing I should be spending my time on versus others spending their time on, or not doing it at all. And there's way too much that an entrepreneur takes on thinking, I have to do this, I have to do this. And my mantra is highest and best use of your time. So we don't, as entrepreneurs, have to boil the ocean, solve the world's problems, do it all ourselves. I found the magic of a virtual assistant, and they are very low cost, actually, very, very low cost. And there is so much that somebody else can do. Outsource it. Outsource it. It's a huge gift, and it's very low cost. So it's a fool's errand to give up sleep when it could actually be the magic bullet to your productivity and improved outcomes.
So this is fascinating. And I want to follow up on this a little bit, because we talked about entrepreneurs, we talked about having ambition, we talked about having passion, being able to sell your story. So many startups fail. And I think very often we think, well, it's the product, it's the technology, it's product market fit. But what I think I'm hearing you say is that's not why startups fail. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Correct. I've actually done a lot of work around this, and there's a great TED talk that Bill Gross did, where he looked at all the factors around this company starting and failing in his portfolio companies. I think it's a YouTube video or a TED talk. And what he found was two things. One is market timing is the number one factor. It's like blows all the other factors away. It's not product market fit. It's not technology. It's market timing. It can't be too early. It can't be too late. Because that's one. People is the other. And it's either the co-founders aren't getting along, the board and the founders aren't getting along, the leadership team's not getting along. There's all sorts of configurations. And trust me, I've probably, in the 25 years I've been doing this, I could pick apart every situation you could possibly imagine. And partly co-founders go into their relationships with less consideration than they did marrying their spouse. And yet they're going to spend more time together than they are with their spouse during the time that they're working on their company. So being intentional about that will help be successful around that partnership and that relationship, and really coming up with how are we going to have a relationship together that we can find out when there's something we need to be talking about. How do we handle conflict? Conflict is really huge. And if you don't deal with conflict, that's when it falls apart. So the people issues are myriad and numerous. And so how do you handle all of those messy people related issues? And that's where all of the failures seem to arise in many different forms.
You know, the word that pops into my head is communication, and you know, relationships is, you know, it doesn't matter the industry, whether you're a manufacturing company, whether you're a veterinarian clinic, no matter what you are, retail store. In the end, one of the things that I think that, and you touched on so brilliantly, An entrepreneur may be skilled in creating something, whether it's a product or a service. But if they don't have the ability to communicate, number one, their product and service to somebody who is a potential buyer, or their vision to employees, it doesn't matter how smart or skilled they are, it's not going to work. Is that right?
That's right. And if they're not secure enough to hire people better than themselves in the functional roles they need, like, can you hire somebody who's a great chief marketing officer or a great chief technology officer or an amazing chief revenue officer and trust them to do their job because they know more than you do? That is oftentimes not allowed because that person gets scared. Look at all that money I'm putting into that, hiring that person. Oh my God, what's happening? And then they micromanage them. And that person gets resentful because, like, well, you hired me to do a job. Why aren't you letting me do the job? And then that relationship falls apart. And now we've gone through, three VPs of sales, because it's a pattern that's happening over and over again. And I see this time and again. And now you've spent a lot of money. Oh, well, the product's not selling. Well, no, it's not the product's not selling. You haven't allowed the sales process to actually formulate because it hasn't gotten to the place where you've trusted the process to occur. So there's a lack of, you could call it emotional intelligence. You could call it my imposter syndrome, that I don't know if I can trust these people because it's my baby and nobody knows how to sell my baby better than I do. Well, you're never going to scale if that's the case.
Well, what's the case for us right now is we've got to take our second break, and we're going to take that short break to hear from our corporate sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Janice Mishala, for our Plead the Fifth section of the show, she gets to be the first one to answer our brand new yearly question that we're going to give to each of our guests. She has no idea what it is. I don't even think Linda does. You're all going to have to find out when you come back next. Don't walk away. There's more of the Shrimp Tank coming up.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, Kitsap Sun Newspaper, BC Fitness Studio, and the Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Okay, well, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we're interviewing the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm co-host Linda Poppy, and we're here today with Janice Mishala, and our next segment is Plead the Fifth.
And Janice, this is where Linda and I are going to pepper you with questions about business, about life, about psychology, maybe even about cats and dogs, who knows? But you're going to have to answer that question honestly and candidly, even if it scares you a little bit. You can plead the fifth, but you can only plead the fifth once. So for the last year, we kind of used May as this time. We asked our guests, if they were to start a new business from a hobby, what would that be? We're not going to ask you that. I've got a whole new one for you. You get to be the beta test on it. Plead the fifth, Janice. What is your reaction to the word impossible?
Never.
So you can
Never
expect
impossible.
never impossible.
It's never impossible. There's always a way around.
And so what if you had somebody, and that's a great answer, but somebody says, well, it's impossible. I can't do it. What are some words of wisdom that you could help them with?
So I think about words like no, impossible, you gotta be kidding. All those words shut people's brains down. So I look for how to make things possible. So I get curious. So what about that makes it impossible? How is it impossible? So I look for ways to create an opening, or look for what the fallacy might be, or what the person's belief system is that gets them to that point. Or what is it that they look at the world thinking about that I don't think about in that world?
Fascinating. So I'm going to ask you, because we've talked a lot about, mindset and being mentally fit. And we talked about sometimes we're our own worst critics.
Mhm.
So what is something that you struggle with in your career that you want to share with us?
Sure. Anxiety. And actually the positive intelligence work helped me a lot. And it was a low level of anxiety that was sort of like, okay, what's going to happen? What shoe's going to fall? What's going to go wrong? It's that sort of, okay, there's always going to be something that is going to happen that I'm not expecting. It's that low level of something's not going to go right, but it's always there. And what that caused me to do was to future trip and say, okay, that's going to go wrong. How? And I go into the future and I catastrophize. I live in the now way more than I ever did.
Yeah, I saw this in a doctor's office just recently, that anxiety is interest due on a debt that hasn't been yet occurred.
I love that, Linda. That's
Yeah.
really good. Can I use that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not mine.
It's been stolen from a doctor's office
Okay.
somewhere. So yeah.
It's probably true.
Well, we're gonna lighten this up a little bit on the next Plead the Fifth. Janice, you live on Whidbey Island, and
Mhm.
some of the people who are listening to this may know where that is. Barb and I grew up on Whidbey Island, although we were way at the north in Oak Harbor. You live in Langley. We used to call Whidbey Island the Rock. We used to, say we lived on the Rock.
Mhm.
What do you find most unique about living on Whidbey Island, and maybe even specifically on an island?
I find it to be like the 1960s. And people are nice here. Guys take my grocery cart back to the store at my car. They'll say, oh, let me do that for you. People still open doors for people. I kind of call it the best of the Midwest meets the best of the Northwest. People are nice. So I find it to be that, not so much of the island part, but just the people have a way of life here that feels older, more of a time from a different time of America.
And that's probably why when we were like 17, we didn't like that. That's probably why we were ready to move out.
Okay, so here's the deal. I miss Trader Joe's.
Oh, not
Okay.
Trader Joe's.
I miss Nordstrom. So, and my UPS guy comes every day to my house, or the FedEx guy. And
Yeah.
we're on first name basis.
All right.
There we go. So I'm going to ask you something totally different now. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be, and what is it you would say to them? What question do you want to ask them?
Okay. So, Melinda Gates, Mackenzie Scott, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and probably that's been on every woman's list lately, especially. Sandy Lerner, who is the founder of Cisco.
Yep.
Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx. And Anita Broadwick, who is the founder of The Body Shop. And then two men, Brad Feld, who is probably my favorite VC out there, and who also is a co-founder of Him for Her, which is about men advocating for women on boards, and Shirzad Chamine, who founded Positive Intelligence. So this is a group of people who founded companies that had a need, but Sandy was like one of the first women VCs in the tech industry. And she's a big animal welfare person. And Anita Broadwick started, cosmetics that were good for the planet and dealt with the planet way before people knew they needed to do that. And then Sarah Blakely, who would have thought you cut pantyhose to make something that shaped our bodies, right? So these are all women who paved ground, and these are men who have supported women in their efforts. So I guess what I would say to these people is, how do we get more women to be brave like you? How do we get more men to be advocates like you? Those would be my questions.
You got Ruth Bader Ginsburg too.
Yeah.
So I can't forget her. Yeah.
Yeah. No, what, and for her, she just was fearless.
Yeah.
And how did she get to be fearless? She had a husband who supported her and who was
Absolutely.
her biggest champion. And I
And
love
she
that. And
supported
I
him
am
too.
lucky to have one of those husbands.
Yeah. She supported him too. She took care of
Yeah.
him when he had cancer,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. I want to come to that dinner. Is there another chair?
Oh, you, Linda, anytime.
All right. Well, Janice, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank. And for people who are listening and watching who want to get in touch with you or learn more about your company, how do they get more information?
My website is janicemachala.com and my email is janice@janicemachala.com. Pretty easy.
All right. So for everyone else too, if you want to check out more about the Shrimp Tank, make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcast, iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, because damn, we are.
Ubiquitous.
We are. And you can also follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Janice, it has certainly been a pleasure meeting you and talking with you. I hope we'll have an opportunity to do some more and save a room at the table for dinner for me too. That I'd like to come as well. Linda, as always, it's been a pleasure. Listen, everybody, do what Linda says. Follow us on Facebook. We live stream. We have episodes all over the place. We'd love to get your ratings and reviews. Our next show is going to be Wednesday, May 11th. Our guest is going to be Jeff Levy. We're going to talk about franchising opportunities with Jeff, and we're debuting our brand new co-host, Craig Swanson. Can't wait to have Craig on. In the meantime, everybody, please be safe, be well, and be prosperous. And I guess I should say, have good mental fitness. Because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond, and